Hey, hi everyone. My name's PK, and here I have Aaron Day, who is a lawyer. He's based in Victoria, and he's done a terrific job of acquiring seven and a half. We'll get into why it's like an integer, not an integer, seven and a half properties since 2014, basically since he graduated university. So I posted in my Facebook group, hey, would anyone like to share their story for the betterment education and inspiration of the entire community, whether you're a client or not? So Aaron's not a client of mine, but he's very graciously put up his hand to volunteer his time and take us through his property journey so that we can all learn from things that he's done really well, things that perhaps he's made mistakes in, and things that he could kind of glean insofar as telling us what to do, what not to do to help expedite and accelerate our own property journey. Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK, and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you.
Oh, thanks for having me, PK. And can I just say thank you for all your content that you publish free of charge. It's excellent resources, and I think I can speak on behalf of everyone to say that we appreciate it a lot and we get a lot out of it,
Well, that
even
means a
though I
lot.
haven't paid you a cent.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot. That does mean a lot. And like in my mind, I really kind of believe that like information, like I share, and then you have to reflect on it, information plus reflection. And then when you actually apply that, that's when you get results. And I mean, I don't know your story. I'll learn about it as we go through, but it sounds like that's exactly what you've done. You've not used a buyer's agent, you've not done any courses, but you've gleaned information probably from a whole host of sources.
Yeah,
You've
for
mulled
sure.
it over. You're obviously a very intelligent person. You're a lawyer. You've kind of thought about it. You've chewed upon it, and then you've actually put it into work. Surely there are ways in which you, in hindsight, would tell yourself, "Oh, maybe I should have done this or done that." But nonetheless, it's only when you take action that you actually get results. So I think that's the first thing that I just want to highlight. Maybe let's just start from the start, Aaron. Like, what kind of made you get into real estate investing in the first place? Because I mean, these days, it's easy to say, oh, this person bought five properties, that person bought seven properties, but it's actually a pretty big feat. And so you must have had some real solid why.
Yeah, I suppose it's been something that's always interested me since I was a kid. Yeah, I didn't grow up rich by any means, not poor, but not rich. My dad, he lived on a war pension, so we didn't have investment properties or anything like that. But I was lucky enough that when we did move around, I was involved in that process of looking at what's something that someone wants in a property, what's an advantage of a location from just a PPR point of view, and that probably sparked an interest from a really young age. And it was always my goal upon graduating from uni that I wanted to buy a house. That was and I was probably more proud of my first house than I was of even graduating, as silly as that sounds.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And so that first house was that was an investment property, right?
Yeah, that was here in Bendigo, sort of in a Bendigo, three-bedroom. I didn't know what I was doing. Dad just said, "Oh, looks like it'd rent out well." I was like, "Okay, let's go." So I didn't know what I was doing, but it was local to me. I understood the area, and I think that's something that so many investors do is, oh, well, I'm familiar with the area, I'll just buy here. And that's certainly not my strategy these days, but it worked for the time.
Yeah, I mean, probably some skill, I don't know, probably some luck, I don't know, but Bendigo's done really well. Maybe I wouldn't say from 2014, right? You'd probably agree with me on that. Probably since 2016 or 17, it's really gone from strength to strength.
Yeah, at the time I was a bit disappointed that I didn't see much growth initially. So yeah, when you buy somewhere where you do have growth at the start, that is so much better.
Yeah. And so then when and where did you buy your second one?
Yeah, so my dad passed away not long after that, and he used to be in the army, and I had this really weird emotional hang up about I want to buy where my dad was years ago when he was in the army. So
Right.
I decided Northwest Brisbane was the place I wanted to buy. And it was 2015 and Sydney had boomed, Melbourne was on the way up, and by some weird logic, I said, oh, Brisbane's got to be next, which I
Mhm.
think a few people probably thought, but
Yeah.
there's no backing for that whatsoever. It was just, why not? So I bought a townhouse, which upon reflection wasn't the greatest purchase.
Uh-huh.
But I bought that in 2015 in a suburb called Alderley, which is near the Enoggera Army Base.
Yeah, Enoggera, there's that army base over there. I remember it.
Yeah, yeah. So I bought that. It was in a complex of five, um, and it didn't really grow much for a few years either.
Yeah.
And the strata fees were a killer, but I was very proud that I had my second place. I only recently sold it, and I made a bit of money on it. And I think that's one of the good things about property, in that it's such a forgiving asset class
Hmm.
that give it a bit of time. Eventually, each area will eventually go up, but there was a bit of opportunity cost in that, I think.
Yeah, I remember like back in 2007, like in high school, they used to take us to that Enoggera Army base for like excursions. I don't know what we used to do there, to be honest, but they used to take us there sometimes. And I always thought it was like a really nice area. Like the houses are really beautiful and big. And I was
Yeah,
like, this looks completely different to a lot of other parts of Brisbane. But just because it looks beautiful, just because the houses are big and where quote unquote rich people live, that doesn't mean that it has any better capital growth than any other place. And I agree with you. Back in 2014, 15, 16, like after Melbourne had boomed to some extent, Sydney had definitely boomed. Brisbane was all the rage, and all these like southern investors from New South Wales and Victoria were like, Brisbane's next because that's the biggest, or the
it's
third
got to
biggest
be.
capital city. It's affordable. It's got to go up. And I was just, I mean, I wasn't super experienced at the time. I was like, yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe that's true, but it never like no nothing happened. Just because something's affordable doesn't mean miraculously it's going to, spark into life. But you can be forgiven for thinking that way, because that was definitely the kind of thought in property industry from all professionals as well, back then. Do you still have that one in near Enoggera and Alderley?
No, I sold the townhouse at the start of this year.
Oh,
So
that's, yeah, you mentioned. And so you
yeah,
would have done pretty well just because by virtue of the last few years, it would have gone up a lot, right?
yeah, I think I made just under 200, which I mean, 2015 could have done better, but better than doing nothing at all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Or if nothing else, now you had two properties, hopefully your confidence levels were going up that, it's not quite like buying vegetables, but at the same time, it's not
Yeah.
like going to the moon. It's actually plausible and achievable even for a young person like yourself at the time. And so when and where did you buy your third one?
Yeah, so my third one, I wanted to buy on the Gold Coast. I was familiar with southeast Queensland. I'd grown up in Toowoomba, even though we live in Victoria. But it just didn't work out. I was going to go in with a friend, and no, it just didn't happen. So the next place that caught my interest was Hobart.
Right.
And I remember reading so much about Tasmania, their rental crisis, which the rest of the country's really only got recently,
Hmm.
but that was happening down there sort of 2017. Families, working families, living in tents at the showground. Absolutely awful stuff. But it shows that there is demand for houses, and so I decided that that's where I wanted to go next. And we were currently building our PPR here in Bendigo, and I remember my mother-in-law saying, "Aaron, you haven't even finished building this, and you want to go down to Tasmania?" I said, "No, I'm so confident that if there's such pressure, uh, there's only one way it can go."
Hmm.
So we went down to Hobart, had a look around, and I had this, oh, I suppose, obsession with development. As a part of my work at the time, I did a lot of property law stuff, and so we bought some vacant land, and it was this corner block, 650 square meters on the eastern shore in a greenfield estate. Now, probably not your usual kind of investment, but I could just see that uh, once developed, these properties were selling for mid threes, high threes, even low fours. And the city of Clarence, where we bought, has this strata rule. It must be over 650 square meters, and it was 650 square meters. So I said, "Yep, we'll get a builder. It'll only cost 400, 450 to put a couple of little villas on there."
Mm-hmm.
Invariably, budgets blow out, timelines blow out, and it went far longer and was more expensive than I thought. But ultimately, we sold it in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
two units, and by virtue of the market, it went up, and it did really, really well. And we were quite lucky. I think anyone who invested in Hobart around that time did really, really well. And
Yeah.
we were lucky we had two, even though each of them, those brand new shiny properties aren't as good as those existing ones with a better land component, which I didn't know at the time, but we still did pretty well.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, at least from a timing perspective, if you got into Hobart 2016 or 17, then that was like happy days. It's probably the 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 site or the property that performed the best in the short term out of the three that you'd got so far. I mean, certainly we were buying in places like Burnie and Glenorchy and other places around Hobart as well at that time. I mean, it's funny you say that because, I think most investors, at least those that are ambitious, after one or two properties, you kind of I don't know if you get bored of just buy and hold property, but you kind of think, oh, the real money must be in development, the real money and how people are really exiting their 9 to 5 or getting like
Yeah,
chunky profits. That's in development. And all of a sudden your sight turns to development and without fully appreciating like just amount of capital that it requires, the
yes.
complexity that's involved and also like the effort, the time effort. And
Mm,
for me, I did the exact same thing. Like after a
yeah,
few properties, I got into development and probably a bit like you, I was maybe a bit lucky with the market and how it turned out. But very quickly my realization was like development's great, don't get me wrong, but it's not for someone like me who when I go to sleep at night, I want to go to sleep with no thoughts in my mind.
yeah, yeah. And cash flow is a killer, and time is money, and it just took a long time, and you're just forking out more money, and the financing side is a bit more complicated. Yeah, but I was a sucker for it, and so a few months later, my best friend and we decided to do another one in
Uh-huh.
Hobart. So all up, we had two development sites in Hobart
Right.
and 5 units, which I think drained us from a cash flow point of view. Capital gain at the end of it was fantastic, but
Yeah.
in between there, I think that is a bit of an opportunity cost too.
Right, right, right. Did you go and like relocate for a period in Hobart from Victoria, or did you just manage this all interstate?
Yeah, we both. My friend lived in Melbourne. I lived in Bendigo. We flew down every couple of months. Spoke to builders, surveyors. It was. I personally loved that side of things. I
Uh-huh.
don't think my friend did quite as much, but it was headaches. It was a lot of headaches. I enjoyed it, but yeah, it's not for everyone. And a greenfield development, I don't know whether that's still for me, even though we did all right.
Yeah, well, the good thing that you did all right, but yeah, different strokes for different folks. But I'm glad you came out of that ahead. I think that's a very important thing, and I think like sometimes we actually reminisce back in 2016, 17, 18. Those were the days where it was easy to build, but
Yes.
even
Oh,
back
no.
then it wasn't easy. And I can tell you, anyone who's trying to do it now, it's like hats off to you if you can make a development like that work predictably and consistently. So yeah, the world has changed a bit, maybe it will go back to how it used to be. But I remember complaining even back then about construction prices in Brisbane had gone up like 20% one year, I think like 2018. And I was complaining back then, but it's much worse now, obviously.
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's wouldn't want to be building right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's like one, two, let's say that's four and a half properties. What and when did you well, what did you do next?
Yeah, so once we sold those, we got a bit of capital out of them and a fair bit of capital out of them, which was really good timing. I then bought some, again, greenfield land here in Bendigo.
Yep.
I found this little development not far from where I live, and that wasn't the reason why I chose it. It's just Bendigo was going gangbusters. And
Yeah.
so I bought a block, only had to put $5,000 down. It was off the plan. The sale price was 240. They said that titles would eventuate around Christmas time 2021. Uh, didn't We still don't have titles yet,
Oh no.
but at least it's worth, I think, about 340, 350. So that
Okay.
one's in the bag, I suppose, so long as I can settle it, and then I don't know what the plans are with it once that happens, but probably not building it this stage.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe just get like a an architect or a draftsperson to do some drawings and sell it off as a house and land or something like that.
Potentially, yeah. We also bought another block of land locally, which we did a two-lot subdivision. Titles still haven't eventuated for that either. So
Okay.
that's another huge risk and opportunity cost of development. It just takes a long time, especially through the COVID years. And yeah, we expect to make a good amount of money in that, but it's not for the faint-hearted.
So that was in Bendigo as well. It was like
Yeah.
a large block that you're just splitting in two, is it?
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah, in a more established area, but yeah, the capital growth in Bendigo during COVID has done a lot of the heavy lifting there. It's
Yeah.
probably come back ever so slightly,
Uh-huh.
um, but you know, it's still been good. It's still been really
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Bendigo's been, yeah, it's sort of been a little bit lagging Ballarat, but Ballarat's come down a bit more than at Bendigo, I would say. But I think long term still very bullish. But right now is probably not the right time, and probably not last year either. But 2020,
good.
start of 2021, yeah, even places like California Gully, I think it's called, and
Yep.
other places we were buying. A lot of clients were buying there. So really, really good capital growth since then. It's kind of disappointing that even just a normal like a large block subdivision and, like infill site, the council takes so long. I mean, that kind of just is the problem. The reason why we have a housing shortage, or one of the reasons, is planning from council and approvals take so long that it's just so hard to get more houses built.
Yeah.
I just think that it's a not only a federal issue, a state issue, but right down to local councils. And I mean, there's actually a lot of land released in Bendigo, if I can remember. I think especially on the sort of west side, there's a bit of land
Fair
released,
bit.
but
Yeah.
I'm not seeing so many houses being built.
Yeah, and these bottlenecks, time and money are the killers for these sorts of projects, whether it's on a little scale like myself and my friends, or whether it's on a really big scale, broad acre development. It just is such a killer to have time and cost blowouts.
So have you changed your strategy now in terms of like your most recent purchases? Are they more set and forget?
Yeah, well, kinda. So the third purchase I made out of the profits from our Tassie developments was another property in Tasmania.
Okay.
We bought in Howrah, which is a little suburb on the eastern shore. Great place. But we bought from a deceased estate. This would have been December 2020, and again, I had this obsession with development. It was a corner block, 683 square meters. House is more towards the front, a 1961 build, and oh, gee, she's rough. But by that time, I'd probably cottoned on to these brand new shiny things. Don't make quite as much money as something with a healthy, good land component. So
Right.
the plan was to build in the backyard because it's on a corner block. Um, but we still own that. But remains to be seen whether building is feasible in the current market. But we've made good money on that as well. So it's just hold and see what happens. And because it's generating that cash, which the other ones didn't, we can hold and it's
Hmm.
not detrimental.
Right. And how are you financing um well, because a lot of these are sort of greenfield sites or development sites, are you getting have like a specialized lender, or are you just going through the big four banks?
We've got a good mortgage broker.
Hmm.
A lot of the loans are through mainstream lenders. For a couple of the purchases, they were through those third tier, those
First Mac
specialist
or
options.
yeah, sure.
And we've refinanced out of those
Right.
largely at this point.
Hmm.
But horses for courses, they serve a purpose, and it means that you can keep things moving. But yeah, normal mortgage broker. We were just lucky that we had a lot of capital from those Tassie developments that we
Hmm.
could, do a lot of these things. And that block, Greenfield block in Bendigo, I've only put $5,000 down, so
Okay.
that's very good. in that.
Right, right, right. Do the banks allow you to refinance those blocks where you haven't actually built, but clearly the land has gone up in value? Do they allow you to refinance it, or only upon building do they allow you to do that?
Uh, we haven't done financing
Okay.
for the land that we're subdividing. That was purchased outright with the profits from Tassie. So
Right, right,
very
right.
lucky with that one. But
Gotcha.
we found that when we were doing those developments, it's impossible to change lenders, or
Hmm.
near on impossible. Lenders don't want to touch something that's half built, or there's too much risk for them, which I totally understand. So
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why we were so, I suppose, cash strapped throughout that building, because we just couldn't refinance at the time. So it was nice once it was done.
Sure, sure. And what's been like your most recent purchases? And I think did you go over to WA, didn't you?
Yeah, so we in early 20 or late 2021, early 2022,
Hmm.
I discovered Perth, and I think part of that could have almost been coming across some of your content. I'm not
Okay.
not entirely
I'll
sure,
take it. I'll take it.
but yeah, we discovered Perth, and I'd never been to Perth before, and so we ended up buying sight unseen, which we did in Tassie. I did another purchase in Queensland, sight unseen, and now again in Perth. And I think that's one thing that I know you speak about a fair bit, and that a lot of investors are probably really worried about. But I come back to the point that what can I see that a building or pest inspector can't? If you study the areas, you understand the demographics, you understand good streets, bad streets. Just being on the ground probably doesn't change a lot, if anything at all. I like visiting them. I enjoy having holidays and seeing the places, but you don't have to.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
learned that when we bought just before the borders opened in Perth.
right, right. Yeah, in fact, I'd even take it as far as to say I probably wouldn't have bought a couple of properties had I actually gone to the trouble of inspecting it myself at my own detriment, because they've gone up a lot and they've done really well. But had I driven those streets myself, I probably would have told myself, I don't know if I want to live here. I don't
Yeah,
think I vibe with this area, and I probably wouldn't have gone ahead. But they've been like one of the most, some of the most fantastic deals that I've bought. So you have to take the emotion out of it. Like you said, let the building and pest inspector do their job, let the property manager do their job. And when you get those two people through, highly qualified people, then I mean, there's really no value that I can't speak for yourself, but there's really no value that I can add over and on top of that. And so you bought in Perth when they still had their borders shut, their state borders
yeah.
shut, which was, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Everyone would love to have bought there, but yeah, that is when I was talking about Perth a lot. Which suburb did you buy, and how much did you buy for it? Can you share a little bit of detail?
Yeah, yeah. I bought in a suburb called Samson, which is, I think, the smallest suburb in Perth, and it's
Hmm.
in between Hilton and Cardinia.
Okay.
So inner south near Murdoch Uni, not far from Freo. We paid 671, so it's not something that you would call a cash flow property. But uh, we I really liked the fact that it was an older property. It was built in 1978, and Perth properties, if anyone's familiar with them, they're solid, double brick. You know, people have this
Yep.
strange hang up about having to have something shiny and new, but no, it's solid, it's good.
Yeah.
It I estimate that it's probably gone up about 100,000 since we bought in January 22. And yeah, it's just been a great property. I've visited since a couple of times, which again, you don't have to do. I
Mm.
enjoy doing. And yeah, it's just a ripper. Really
Yeah,
happy with
nice
it.
one. I'm glad that that you got at least some asset over there, because I think long-term portfolio, of course, everyone's got their own strategy, but in my mind, it's good to have some sort of stake in the ground in a upcoming city like Perth,
Yeah,
which is really shedding its old stigma, and I think in 20 years' time will be maybe even unrecognizable. And yeah, they don't build properties on the East Coast, certainly not these days like they used to in Perth 30, 40 years ago. So that's some of the most amazing. Yeah, I mean, you can't get that level of build finish or quality these days unless you're paying, I don't know, I'm just making up a number, four
enormous.
thousand dollars a square meter or something. And that used to be luxury. Now it's just like
Just
normal.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the future for you, for yourself, in terms of property investing? So like I feel that you've done a lot, like even though you've been doing it for almost 10 years now, you've done a lot of different strategies, and you kind of backed yourself as well. It's not easy to go into development, but you've backed yourself, you've tested the waters. What's your strategy in terms of like why are you doing this over the next 10 years, and how do you hope to achieve that?
Yeah, I think more of a buy and hold is probably where we're going to. It's just so much simpler. The cash flow works out so much better. Recently, we purchased again in Perth with some close friends, and so that's how I've got the half property.
Sure.
We bought up at Heathridge
Heathridge, yeah,
near
nice.
Joondalup. Yeah,
It's a
and
good spot.
oh, it's a fantastic spot. We bought in March this year, so I've still got a lot of faith in Perth, and if our biggest problem at the moment, though, is serviceability.
Hmm.
With interest rates going up, we've hit the serviceability wall, and hence why we're starting to, you know, go in with friends and that sort of thing. So, I'm not really sure if there'll be too many more without offloading some of the others, but we'll see what opportunities present themselves. But the overall plan, I suppose, is um, I don't want to be doing the 9 to 5 until I'm 67 or whatever the age is these days.
Hmm.
And my wife's of the same thoughts. So, I think in a capitalist system, you're either on this side of the ledger or that side of the ledger. And it may or may not be fair. That's not a question for me to answer. But uh, I think if you can, if you don't have, difficulties in your life or trauma or that kind of stuff, if you don't have those hangups, do whatever you can to be on the right side of the ledger because no one else is going to help you as much as what you can help yourself. So it's our plan that perhaps in a couple of booms in a couple of cities, we'll be at the point where we will have that financial freedom and I'm hoping it's not too many years away and then you can choose to work rather than being forced to work and I think that'll be a far better place to be.
Yeah, no, very well articulated. I mean, I echo what you're saying there. Well, we don't. choose the game that we play, but we have to learn to play it because it's been given to us anyway, and the type of society. But don't get me wrong, I think Australia is the best country in the world. I am very grateful to be living here, but I think the way that the capitalist society is going, yeah, there's it's inevitable. There's going to be more and more and more haves, and there's going to be more and more and more have-nots. And, I think, like they say on the aeroplane, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it onto your child. I always thought that was weird. I was like, no, I think I'm going to do it on my son first. But they tell you to put it on yourself first. So I think, yeah, we need to make sure we're on the right side of that ledger. And, people don't need to buy 7.5 properties like you have. And you've done incredibly well just by pure determination and resourcefulness. And obviously, you're like a go-getter. You have like a can-do attitude, clearly, but you don't need that many. Even if your situation just allows one property, two properties, just make sure you beg, borrow, and steal your way onto the right side of the ledger, because in 20 years' time, don't think there's not going to be another boom, two booms, three booms, four booms in the real estate market. There's so much money awash. That's how modern monetary theory works. That's how
Yeah.
fiat currency works. It's just going to be more and more debt, which isn't going away anytime soon, and that means more and more inequality for those people who don't know how to correctly leverage debt. So you want to be on the right side of the equation, and then hopefully, from that vantage point, you can help other people as well. Once you've got that oxygen mask on yourself. So I think that's a really important point that you raised, and perhaps the last question or last couple of questions. What's like, there's going to be so many people watching this, and perhaps a lot that want to go down the route that you have, mixture of buy and hold plus small residential. I mean, when you're a new investor and you put in property investment, all of a sudden on YouTube, on Facebook, you get so many ads like NRAS, NDIS, rooming houses, like small scale developments, instant equity, 300,000. It's just so much stuff that comes up. What's like some advice that you can give to people who are perhaps in your shoes back in 2014? Like, how would you
Yeah.
have done things differently, perhaps?
Yeah, there's a lot that I would have done differently. I think there's an enormous opportunity cost in being distracted by certain things. While we did really, really well with development and that sort of thing, especially in Tasmania, what if it wouldn't have worked out? And so I think after analyzing what we've done and different markets and now being a little bit more sophisticated, looking at data points and that sort of thing, ultimately, I think if I were to start again, find the right market, do the research, and just buy something existing. You get that cash flow through, and then you can, wash, rinse, and repeat.
Yeah.
Um, and had we done that, and had I been able to buy on the Gold Coast in sort of 2016 instead of Brisbane, or had we bought existing properties in Hobart, while we may have made a similar amount of money, we would have had a lot more serviceability to be able to, really leverage up. So it might have been more than 7.5. So
Hmm.
I think sometimes it's really easy to overcomplicate things.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's really easy to think that you know I know better because I've got this secret sauce or something. But
Yeah.
no, it's actually, um, if you know what to look for and you know how to look for it, it's not that difficult,
Yeah.
really, if
Yeah.
you have the right settings in place.
Mm.
So yeah, it would be buy and hold, and yeah, and I've got a lot of faith in markets, uh, in particular Perth, and as you say, you know, it, I feel really sorry for those people who say, oh, I've been looking to buy a house for 4 years and I've missed out at successive auctions because I didn't want to pay too much. No, at the end of the day, you have to be realistic as to what market price is or close to that, and just hop in the right markets, because you just get left behind otherwise. And
Mhm.
there's certainly places that will definitely boom. Perth is one of them, and one, probably two, big lessons I've learned is that land to asset ratio is such an important factor. And then also regression to the mean.
Mhm.
No matter what happens, if it's, I'm not talking the back of Burke or anything like that, but if it's an economy that has a critical mass where people buy and sell on a regular basis, which is most places in Australia, um, eventually each place will have its place in the sun,
Yeah.
and I think that's Perth at the moment, and we've seen other places have that, and it's almost as though if you plot it out on a chart, which I've done 100 times, different places have their rises and then flatline, and then someone else will have their rise and then flatline. So riding those waves, I think, is something that's really important to research, understand, and I just smile to myself whenever someone says, "Oh, you have to buy in Sydney; it exceeds everywhere else." Well, maybe between about 2012 and 2022, but apart from that, no.
Yeah. Well done. No, well said. Every place has its stay in the sun. And I think as you were saying, I was sort of thinking, property investing is simple for the simple and complicated for the complicated. I think the way that you're describing it, it suggests to me that I'm not saying you've got it all figured out per se, but you come across in a very straightforward and well, uh, like a well understood manner. You're describing things very simply. Every market will go up, right? It's just about making sure you time it. And like you said, I think to highlight, don't ignore cash flow. Capital growth, fantastic. We want capital growth. That's the engine, but we also need cash flow. And I think so many people, especially those who are like professionals, that maybe they're on good incomes, 200, 300, 400, 500K per annum. They sort of say, oh, to hell with cash flow. I just want to get my net worth up. But really, we want to preserve our borrowing capacity because if we preserve it through cash flow, then we can borrow more and therefore we can add more assets to our portfolio. And more assets means more of a base that will multiply. Therefore, your net worth will go up even more. So these are just very simple things, really, but I think it's uncommon sense. So thank you, yeah, for sharing that. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Lastly, was there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap it up, Aaron?
um, I just want to say a little bit of a story about our purchase in Brisbane in 2021.
Mhm.
I bought a place in Brisbane, and it was a hot market at the time, as you'd know. And I was keen on Brisbane. The plan was to sell the townhouse, get better land to asset ratio of buying a house on its own 405 square meter block. And so this particular property, built in 1930, come on the market on Tuesday afternoon. And I decided there and then, yep, this is a good property, good price, good location. It had all the fundamentals that I was looking for in the right suburb, and so I had the building and pest inspection booked within an hour of it being listed.
Okay.
Um, Inspection done, report completed. I put an unconditional offer in, and it was mine by Saturday morning. So, one lesson I think for people out there who are unsure of, should I jump in, should I not? If it's the right place, don't waste time. If you can get that unconditional offer in and have all those ducks lined up so you're not taking unreasonable risks, that you've already got all that sorted out, that is a really good place to be. And we
Mhm.
were very lucky that we were able to be competing with others, and there was 6 or 7 offers in at the time because Brisbane was crazy then. Yeah, being able to be unconditional without risk was, I think, a great place to be.
Nice one. No, that's great advice. Yeah, I think if you're educated and you know what you want, and when you see it, then you can actually see this is exactly bullseye. This is exactly all the data lining up for me. This is what I want. I'm gonna move fast, and that's what you need to do in a hot market. but you need some education like you had and you've built up over time to be able to have that confidence to pull the trigger. So that's some fantastic advice, Aaron. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll just finish off as well by saying, like, I think it's really awesome that you've come on and shared your story and so many, like, there's something to be said about being humble enough to say, yep, these are some of the mistakes I made and this is something I'd do differently. I think, that helps so many people fast track their property investing. And I hope everyone not only kind of, knowledge is like food. You have to swallow it, you have to chew it, you have to swallow it, and only then does it nourish your body. So hopefully this, doesn't just go in one ear and out the other. There's so many gold nuggets that hopefully people can mull it over and really take action. If this interview serves to just help even 10 people take the next step, I think that's, achieved what its goal was. So I really appreciate you making time here on this. What is it today? Wednesday midday,
Yep.
out of your busy schedule. And very grateful. Thank you, Aaron.
No worries, PK. Thank you, and thank you again for all your, well, the, won't say advice, the guidance that you provide for everyone out there, off your own bat, with no expectation of making any money from it. It's really, really good stuff. Thank you.
Oh, that's really cool of you. Thank you. That means a lot to me. And guys, I hope hopefully you enjoyed it. There's actually like more than 100 of these types of interviews, both from clients and also non-clients. I'm interviewing more and more non-clients because I think, everyone has a story to tell, and we can all learn from all sorts of people from different walks of life. So go and check that out on my YouTube channel and other platforms. I think, yeah, I honestly don't mind if you're doing the course or not, but it will really steer you in the right direction. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and thank you for being with us. Thank you again, Aaron.
Thank you.